when you have someone's attention, you need to do what you can when possible to capitalize on that attention now, because getting that attention back 3 hours later or 2 days later is not always as easy, right?
Yeah.
So we've created the ability to actually initiate a fully secure telehealth session right from the live chat, right? So if you're talking to somebody who's curious about treatment then and there, and the right things evolve, it may happen that you can't do it, right? But in the sense that you can say, hey, do you mind if we spend 5 minutes to do a quick video chat? I can try to get a better handle on what you're dealing with and talk about how we can help you. You can do these little micro sessions, right? And we can initiate that directly from a live chat and hook the person up with any number of the staff members who happen to be available, obviously, to do that right then and there.
Hello, and welcome to the Cash-Based Practice Podcast, a production of drjarodcarter.com, aimed at giving physical therapists and other healthcare practice owners the information needed for success in the private pay business model. And now, here's your host, Jarod Carter.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back, and thank you so much, as always, for joining. This is episode 130, and this is an interview with Scott Waddell of PatientSites.com. He's the CEO and founder at Patient Sites, and of course, Patient Sites is the sponsor of this podcast. And I'll tell you, like every time I have him on the show, I just learn so much. And not to say I don't learn a lot from all my guests, but it's just different when you're speaking with someone who's not necessarily like a solo practice owner, but that works with hundreds of clinics and has been in the tech and marketing world both for decades. It's just really a treat to have him on every time. And this time we first kind of get into what he is seeing, the clinics that have survived and really thrived through recent months of the pandemic, what he's seen them do and some really cool strategies that I'm excited to implement in my own practice. So definitely listen for, my surprised reactions to some of those. I really am pumped about that. And then we talk about, the surviving of what we consider to be on the near horizon. I think most would agree, there's no way we're not going to have some pretty intense economic impacts from what's happened in recent months and continues to be the case. And so some really, really great strategies that he's giving there. And one of those kind of relates, or not kind of, but relates to SEO, search engine optimization, and ultimately building assets within your website that produce leads and patients regardless of economic client, because they're built right. And we, in fact, as you'll hear, I was like, man, I have to see what you're talking about, because it wouldn't necessarily convey as well in audio form. So we actually did just now, a few days after recording the interview, went back and we did a screen recording video showing exactly what he's talking about with this SEO opportunity mining. So just as an overview, it's basically looking at the data and seeing what people are actually searching for, not just as like a Google keyword search tool, top level searches, but being able to dive into subtopics and seeing where it makes sense to extract those key phrases and keywords that people are using and clearly searching for, and then creating from those your content, your blog posts and articles, and et cetera. So that's a really, really cool video that you can find at the show notes of this episode. If you want to check out exactly how they do that, go to drjarodcarter.com/130, and that should take you there. And we'll just have it embedded there in the show notes from where we put it on YouTube. So really excited both about this episode and that video. Definitely listen for those strategies and tactics, both on what you can implement now to continue to do well during this, during this pandemic and during these times, and also continue to thrive as we move into kind of not necessarily uncharted waters, but uncertain times ahead. As always, thank you so much for joining. If you get anything out of this podcast, please hop over to iTunes and leave an honest review. I would really, really appreciate it. With all that said, here is Scott Waddell of PatientSites.com. Welcome back, Scott. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. And I always learn so much from these interviews. You guys are really at the forefront of what's working now as well as what is going to be needed in the near and distant future. So I'm pumped about this. Thank you again.
Thank you for the invite. That's the feeling's mutual, and just some of the chatter what we had prior to booting this thing up here. It's always inspiring to hear what you're working on, and
well, thank you.
Some exciting things happening.
Yeah. All right. So let's, I think most people understand, patient sites. If they've been listening to my podcast, they hear about it every episode. But why don't you just give a little background on kind of what brought you to this point in the career, and then we'll dive into the stuff we were talking about, with the pandemic and what's working, what's not working, what's on the horizon.
Yeah, sure. So our website's patientsites.com. And to keep this short so we can get into some of your content here, I've been running tech businesses I feel older every time I do these things because the numbers increment higher, but north of 20 years. And one of the constant themes with a lot of what we've built over the years has been content marketing and content management systems for communicating with customers and prospects and whatnot. So we built a syndication system back in the 90s before there was any such thing as web content syndication.
Like an RSS thing?
So pre-RSS. So
wow.
It was before RSS existed. So we actually at one point were a hub where a lot of media companies would come to get content that we had aggregated from various sources. We normalized the format similar to basically RSS put us out of business. So, so it was basically a pre-RSS thing. So we've been doing this for quite a while, and Patient Sites has been around for over 10 years. And so we do content-based marketing for physical therapy industry, right? So it's everything to do with patient education, lead generation, newsletters, SEO type stuff. And it's been a great 10 plus years. We've got lots of awesome clients, and it's an industry we're passionate about and happy to be here.
Cool. So, like you just mentioned, you have lots of awesome clients, and so you're in a situation way beyond, I think, any guests that I've had recently or might have in the future, in that connection you have, that direct client connection and feedback, an ongoing helping of so many practice owners in this situation. And at the time of this recording, we're talking, basically end of July, early August 2020. We're about 4 or so months into this crazy pandemic. So I'd love to know your take, giving that connection and working with so many practice owners, and also being in Canada, but I'm sure most of your clients are in the US.
They are. Yep.
And so, what is your 10,000 foot view of what you've seen as far as how practice owners have been affected, and the things, whether it's a characteristic of the practice owner or actual strategies that have kind of helped those who are doing best to do as good as they can?
Well, you could probably have set me up for an hour with that your leading question.
Yeah.
So I'll talk, and you can kind of stop or interject as we need.
Sure.
Well, I think first of all, when you look at what's happened with the COVID pandemic, I think we need to back up the truck a little bit and take our hats off to the practice owners that have been persisting through what the cards they've been dealt. And I think all of us, right, the cards that we've been dealt in life. And you talk about economic issues and working through recessions, and I don't think we've ever seen anything like this, where for good parts of the country there was either forced closures or certain clinics deciding to close because they felt that was best, or trying to persist through. This has been a really tough time for everybody, and I think for a lot of business clinic owners, it's been pretty devastating. I don't care what industry you're in, you don't start a business without some level of passion, right? And it's we're going to talk a lot today about tactics and strategies, and I think there's a lot of great and kind of exciting opportunities that things that people can work on. But first of all, hats off to the hustlers, as we call them, and everybody who's been grinding and trying to fight their way through this. So I talked about the fact that I been in business for over 20 years. In 2000, we had this was actually in the post RSS days. we had gone from my basement to 25 people inside of about, just under 2 years. We were in the middle of a multi-million-dollar deal when the .com crash hit hard and impacted all of our clients, right? And we went from the tap being shut off overnight, not unlike a lot of what's going on here. And I know that kind of thing's tough, right? I think this is where when I talk to clinic owners and we look at what clinics are doing, all the respect in the world goes to everybody who's pushing through. So I think that is a kind of, I think we need to realize that commonality, right? Of, we're all in this together. From our standpoint, we've been pretty early on in patient sites, I think trying to be hopefully on the cusp or a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of where people were at. So we go back to March. One of the things that we do here is we produce a lot of content, for a whole variety of purposes, whether it's patient education or lead generation, et cetera. And we have the ability for our clients to push content into their marketing system so that it's essentially ready to go, but can be edited. So we go back to March and, you look at what people were dealing with then, it was, it was purely education on health and processes such as don't come into the clinic if you think you have symptoms, or when you do come in, sanitize, we started this whole concept of distancing before there was any concept of shutdown or really drop off in business, right? So, phase one for us was just working with providing clinics with the pure communications content they needed for many of them before they realized that they needed it, right? And we had clients that started, going, oh man, we need to get in, people have on our side, we've rarely been busier, right? Because when this kind of thing is going on, communication is key, right? It's important as a clinic that you're keeping your customers abreast of what's going on. And I think a lot of, marketing and communications that happens in this kind of phase is less to do with lead generation and more to do with communicating and managing your own customers, all the way from just setting, updates in terms of what your processes are, how you're dealing with what's going on. So, obviously in phase one, there was a lot of content around just how to approach the clinic and how to interact with staff and, how the clinic is going out of their way to make you feel comfortable, right? And, that was probably the easier to manage aspect of things. And then, as we progressed to, patients wondering, is it safe to come in? Should I come in? Some clinics, forced closing, some clinics, partial closing. Then you move into a whole different phase of, how do we modify business operations, right? And that's where I think, even clinics that have remained open have dealt with that. How do you deal with patients that decide that they didn't want to come in some of those tougher times? And even, today there's, we hear, there's some number of patients that prefer to, keep their distance and play it safe. So how do you change business around that? And that's obviously where the whole telehealth thing came into play. And I think you Jarod, have been pretty active in that world, right, with your clinic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we've seen a lot of clinics go down that road. Telehealth is an area where I see I think a significant amount of opportunity, and not just from a treatment standpoint, from a role that can play both in lead nurture, patient experience, and post-discharge, right? So, there are, you look at times like this and you think about some of the creative things that'll come out of it, right? And there's a sense where, I think there's lots of clinic owners, clinicians, patients, who have never really done this remote video stuff, period, have all become acclimatized to it in, all aspects of life, be it how they talk to their friends or family, how they deal with work. And, now the idea of talking to a physical therapist over video, it's not a big leap anymore, right? You go back 6 months ago, that was a huge leap in just, trying to wrap your mind around it for a lot of people, right? And while that'll never replace hands-on treatment, right? We all know that especially in the world of manual therapy, there is no replacement. But you start to think about what are the other uses of that type of cultural change where people are now open to having these kind of video conversations. I think there's lots of opportunities that, clinics haven't even scratched the surface on, that you can integrate into business processes. So,
like,
you know,
I mean, if you have some ideas, I'd love to hear, outside of just giving, telehealth treatment, are we talking like, when you say lots of opportunities, what do you mean?
yeah, so some examples, there's some sandbox things that we're working on internally. Sandbox meaning as in beta, testing a variety of things out. And one of the things we can maybe, provide some insight in a little later is we have this chatbot thing that we've been building. But to kind of jump to the tail end of how that escalates is we have the ability to go from a chatbot to a live chat, right? With a receptionist or a PT or whatever. And if we're having one of the things I think when it comes to, lead marketing is when you have someone's attention, you need to do what you can when possible to capitalize on that attention now, because getting that attention back 3 hours later or 2 days later is not always as easy, right?
Yeah.
So we've created the ability to actually initiate a fully secure telehealth session right from the live chat, right? So if you're talking to somebody who's curious about treatment then and there, and the right things evolve, it may happen that you can't do it, right? But in the sense that you can say, hey, do you mind if we spend 5 minutes to do a quick video chat? I can try to get a better handle on what you're dealing with and talk about how we can help you. You can do these little micro sessions, right? And we can initiate that directly from a live chat and hook the person up with any number of the staff members who happen to be available, obviously, to do that right then and there, right? So that, for example,
cool.
could be a change to a business process where you say, I would never have conceived of that 6 months ago because, culturally, the reality is, we've taken, many years, right, of what would be a cultural curve to get used to this kind of thing and compressed it inside of 4 months of COVID, right? So that's an example of where, the technology and the tactic is not the thing about this. It's the fact that people are now more open to this kind of thing than were in the past. So I think that is one example. Another example is if you're dealing, with, especially as, people may be coming in less often sometimes, you could use short video sessions during the treatment process. So, you look at the effect of drop-off rates, so what if you squeeze a 5 or 10 minute video session strategically in between some of the treatments, just say, hey, I want to do a check-in and see how you're doing with this exercise, right? Make some small adjustments over video. You're using that to sustain the relationship, continue to add value, and acclimatize the patient during treatment. When you're doing in-person treatment, acclimatize them to this whole idea, because I think, one of the other opportunities is, you look at the other side of discharge. And I know a lot of clinics, pre-COVID have, talked about the fact that let's not use the word discharge because, most businesses, smart businesses, try to build customers for life, right? And find ways to continue to serve them. And I'm fully supportive of that, right? That, find whatever value add services that you can introduce to your patients to continue, working with them. But, I think there's also a reality, like I tend to be a realist in a lot of this, where a lot of patients come in looking for discharge, right?
Yeah, they want to get better. And
you look at it. So from the clinic standpoint, there's lots of business reasons why you want to extend service, and obviously adding value is good for the patient. But let's realize that most patients, that is the success, right? Was once they're discharged. So if you can acclimatize them to these short little video sessions, either with pre-visit, during treatment, then afterwards, it's not a big leap to say, hey, you know what? We want to get together with you once a month, right? For 5-10 minutes on video session, check in on how you're doing. Again, you're sustaining the relationship. I think there's ways that you can charge, some amount of money for those sessions. And that's also becomes the hook in terms of where you can introduce some of these other additional value add things, whether it's, massage therapy coming in for stretching sessions, sport specific treatment, can all come from this whole idea of micro videos, right? So that's where you take the concept of telehealth, not just being trying to replicate or deliver treatment by video, but you look at the cultural shift in terms of people's willingness to use that technology and go, I think there's so many creative ways that the clinic of the future can use that, all the way from, somebody who's a prospect talking to you on your website through to a patient who's completed treatment.
Right on. That's so exciting too. The idea of being able to have a live chat or a chat bot that rolls into live chat, and then you could roll that straight into an actual telehealth, basically, free consult.
Yeah.
And I mean, because you're right, we have a lot of people, over time that they'll fill out our websites, inquiry forms, and we can't ever get them on the freaking phone.
That happens more often than not.
Text, phone, email,
yeah,
multiple attempts, and it's like, from your form that you filled out, like, you're in a lot of pain, you're dealing with some stuff here, and you think we can probably help, or you wouldn't have taken the time, but now you won't answer the phone or pick it up or reply to a text or an email. Like, what the heck,
It's too often the case.
They are, we're all human, and a lot of humans, they're just in that moment, and a lot of times those forms we'll see they're filled out in the middle of the night. Someone's woken up in pain and they're looking for a solution. But then the next day it's good enough where it's like, it's getting better. It's getting better. Right. So there's all kinds but the psychology of decision-making is an interesting one. I'm passionate about constantly. That's a whole other
session.
Exactly. That's part two. But that's really exciting about, can we take a website visitor and immediately roll them into that free consultation that normally we're trying to get them into 2 or 3 days later. That's fantastic. I'm really excited to hear more details on that one. I know it's sandbox right now, but are y'all, is there, not to put you under the thumb, but like, do you have a time frame on when that might be? So we're going into beta testing.
We're going into beta now. So we did training with 15 clinics last week. So we're going into beta with the first number of clinics now, including the whole telehealth hook. And again, it's encryption, all of those things related to HIPAA.
Got to be safe.
You got to be safe. So it's not as simple as, hey, as you'll know, it doesn't matter what the context is. You can't launch FaceTime or whatever, right? So when we're launching this from live chat, we're launching it through the secured channel that we use, that's used for telehealth type hookup, right? And we have a partner company, Clinic Master, who they basically developed a telehealth what I call a telehealth light system, purely during COVID, light in the sense that it's not hooked into some more kind of complex suite of software you have to sign up for. So we partnered with them, and we actually did through the whole COVID situation. We were able to partner and provide for like 4 hours a day of free telehealth technology. So to clinics, just to try and be helpful. So we have seen quite a bit of uptake on this. And again, back to, I'm less of a technology guy and more, trying to understand what's the business case and is this something people will adopt? And I'm just pretty curious myself about the whole idea of, I think people are likely to adopt this kind of thing today, and they would not have 6 months ago. So that in and of itself is, you have to look at those kind of things that are shifting and think differently, right? And that's where I think there can be some new areas of opportunity that open up due to what's happening. Not that is going to, in and of itself, offset all the negative hits that a business has taken, but you have to sit back and say, okay, well, how can we retool, and what are the opportunities to improve as a business? And I think that's is one huge area.
Quick little side logistical question there, because live chat has been something that before all this I was very interested in, and we even tried when we went with a phone system that said that their texting was HIPAA compliant and that they had a HIPAA compliant live website chat. And I was like, oh, I'm in, well, it ended up that it was a disaster and their stuff doesn't work.
So ultimately, you should not be going. I don't think it works well to be going back, and because you're always opening up Pandora's box, even in terms of how do you end a conversation with somebody when you get into too much information via some texting message. So go back to what is the general order of progression that you want to design. So the way we've set it up is we've designed a chat bot which provides interactive functionality that can also complete a lead inquiry. But have the ability for if there's a therapist or a front office person who can take it over, basically all the staff get notified when somebody's engaging with the bot, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Gives you the opportunity to take it over. And
cool.
The purpose of that takeover is to connect with the patient. So is it best that we call you? Are you available now to do a video consult, right? And from ultimately from a security standpoint, it's best that everything happens in those formats, either, phone call, video consult using telehealth. And that's really the flow that we've designed. Then the quicker you can get somebody to actually talk to you, right? Because you have their attention. So we want to convert that attention into a conversation, a live conversation, one way or the other. And that's also why we built this, the connection for telehealth.
So with the chat bot, BOT, for those who aren't familiar, it's basically automated messaging back and forth, and based on, and I want to, of course, my marketing mind and tech mind, it's kind of going in this, I have all these questions. So you guys, I'm guessing, have worked out, because you're professional marketers, you're helping clients all the time to market. Have you done a lot of testing where it's like, okay, when we have the bot ask this, we get a better traction than when they ask this first, or something like that? I mean, how have you worked out what questions are asked by the bot?
Yeah. So we're not, I wouldn't say we're, hardened in terms of, been through so many changes that we're solid there. Like we are actively making changes.
Okay.
And as you said, we're going into, we've had a couple of clinics testing for a while, but now we're going into a broader beta phase. And that's part of our initiative. Now, we did live chat 6-7 years ago. And everything we're doing now has actually been a dust off of, we've blown the dust off of technology we built 6 or 7 years ago that I think may have been a little bit too early. But the idea with the bot is, so the one question we start with, and this is what we learned from, going through a lot of logs years ago, is just a simple question. And we introduce it as a bot, right? Because one of the other key things is sometimes people dress a bot up to look like you're talking to a person.
Right.
And the minute somebody realizes they're not, you've really ticked them off, right?
Yeah.
So, you've got to be honest with what you're doing, right? And again, internally, our view is just to try and, get engagement with the bot, although the bot will answer questions. But the area of opportunity I see is this whole idea of notifying the staff when somebody's engaged with the bot, and then you jump in and take it over, right?
Okay.
But we start with one key question. Are you an existing patient? Yes or no?
Oh,
right?
And then they're
okay. And then we fork the bot options based on that, because an existing patient, is probably looking to cancel or reschedule an appointment. And if they say no, then we provide some different button options, such as free. You want to schedule a free consultation if that's what a clinic offers, or book an appointment if they don't do that. Information on services, information on pricing, the kind of things that somebody may be looking for. So we split that set of options based on whether they're an existing patient or not, smart. Right?
Yeah.
And then we can do other things, like in the bot, if somebody wants to schedule a consultation, because let's assume that somebody from the office does not take it over, right? Because you may not always be available to go and take that over live.
Yeah. Could be at 1 a.m.
Right? It could be, right? Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. Could be. So we have other functions, like we can collect the information, like their name, email, phone number. And what we will do is if this lead comes in during business hours, is we do a real-time call connect. So there'll be a number that the clinic provides, which generally is the office number, but it can be another one. And our system will automatically dial the clinic and say, hey, we have somebody we've just talked to via the chat bot. Press 1 if you're available to talk to them now, and it'll do a call connect to the patient within 15 seconds, right?
Wow.
And in that context, nobody had to be actively monitoring anything. But again, and nor does the patient know. So the key thing on all this is you want to surprise and exceed expectations on the patient side. So if somebody didn't answer that call and press 1, the patient didn't know any better, right?
Okay. That patient is not on the phone at that point.
No,
waiting.
No. So the system calls the patient after you press 1, right?
Okay.
So it goes to whatever number you want, and once you say I can take the call, then it basically 3-way calls, right? Dials the patient right in. But that connection happens within 15 seconds, right?
Wow.
So back to the whole idea of, if we have somebody who you have them in that moment, a lot of what we're doing is, how do we capitalize on that moment? So we think there's a couple of interesting things, such as the call connect, or having somebody live from the clinic take over for the bot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if that live person can convert it into a video a telehealth session, right?
Yeah.
Even better, right? So those are all around capitalizing on that moment, right?
Man, that's awesome. I'm going to have to keep, if I get this going, keep my my home office a little more clean so I can just hop on and take those, be on a telehealth session all of a sudden.
You know what though? Like that's the whole other thing that's changed culturally here, right? Is, you look at people, we had some friends over the other night, we're sitting in the backyard and, there was probably 10 minutes of stories of what's happened on the video sessions during work, right? The kids, the background, and this is not, stuff they've seen on YouTube. This is stuff that's happened in their own sessions. So I think there's also a sense where, this idea of video and a therapist talking to a patient in some context having to be super slick. People are now, this how we perceive this idea of video communication has changed, right?
Yeah.
So I think you could take it from your car, right? If that's where you get the call, right? And,
it's like,
and it works off a cell phone. So this telehealth thing, it'll work. It doesn't have to be at a computer. You can do it off your cell phone, right? So, and I think people appreciate, that kind of, quick response and authenticity, right?
Right.
So, again, that's another small thing you look at. There's a cultural shift that's happened through all this as we've just become more accepting of we're all just people, having these video conversations.
It's like I think it was a reporter on, it was like Good Morning America or something. He was conferencing in, and there he is with his nice jack suit and tie and his boxers. And you could totally see his boxers. It's really funny. Yeah. Oh man, exactly. This is exciting stuff. So, we've kind of already gotten into what you guys are trying to help clinics with now, and then providing moving forward. But if we circle back to, these last few months, I mean, have you had any clinics that kind of, in your mind, stood out as adapting to this in an extraordinary way and really doing, as good as possible? We're at a time when break even is pretty darn good, or not firing people is pretty darn good. And if so, whether it's a characteristic of them and their team or actual strategies, I'd love to know, if you've seen anything that's like that really seemed to work well outside of just implementing telehealth, but maybe the way that they marketed the telehealth, the way that they got current patients to try it out, or any of those kind of factors.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll loop around a couple of different thoughts on this one. And one key thing is that in all of this, there's no magic bullet, right? There's no one thing. And if there's one if there is one thing that I hope becomes a healthy shift in some of what we've seen in physical therapy marketing through all this, it's just a sense that clinics need to be captain of their own ship as it comes to their marketing, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes I've had a feeling that people are looking for someone else to have the magic sauce that they can just go and say, hey, go get all my leads for me, right? Well, the reality of it is that your marketing is a mix, right? And there's various things that need to come together to make things work well. And we've seen some creative things going on. So for example, we have a clinic that as a lot of clinics have been doing things like workshops for a while. So some have moved the traditional workshop to online. And we've seen, a number of clinics do that. And those are often clinics that were largely forward thinking earlier, right? Because they had been doing them offline. So, it became fairly simple to try and replicate those things on an online situation. So I think those kind of group format meetings are interesting. One of the really cool things that I've seen a couple clinics do is kind of like almost like Reddit AMA or Ask Me Anything sessions. And what they've done is, again, you look at the why, right? So even doing an online workshop, you're asking for a commitment for somebody to be available at a certain time,
right?
And it's your time, not their time, right? And while that worked for some, it doesn't work for all. So I think they kind of, bent the idea of a workshop with an AMA approach. And so they sent an email out to their clinics and said, whatever the time was, Thursday night at 7:00, we're going to be talking low back pain. Send us your questions, and we're going to be answering the questions live. Come join us. If you can't join us, we'll send you, the recording. Well, now as a patient, I may have become a part of that process without being there at 7:00 on Thursday night. And now when I get the recorded video of that session, I'm engaged, right? Yeah. I'm part of it, right? I want to watch it because, the 15 seconds I took to send in a question, drew me into that, right? So, again, that's an example of, slightly bending an existing concept and finding ways to engage people, right? And I think that's
fantastic.
I thought that was a great idea,
yeah.
right?
So just on the logistical side, so that I can go do this myself, because I love that question. And I just started a newer, to me, approach to email marketing. I've not been really more active than just your typical monthly newsletter, which is good, better than nothing by all means. But I just last week started to send these like weekly story-based email, text only, no images. So we get into inboxes, all that kind of stuff. And
I guess that's something about ribs or
short rib. Oh, you're on my list. Okay.
Yeah.
Dude, I just sent that out yesterday.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Within 2 hours, I got 5 replies. I never get replies to my newsletters, right?
Yeah.
Within 2 hours, I got 5 replies.
That's awesome.
And just for the context for the listener, I'd had this amazing customer experience. And by the way, anyone on my email list for this business is going to hear about this as far as like, it'll be bent on, customer service, obviously. But I had this amazing experience in a really tough time after a few very hard days from a local Mexican food place that, the owner essentially came and delivered the stuff himself. And didn't have to do that, obviously, because the app we were using for that, they totally botched it. And so I told that story and kind of hooked it back in the way at the end. It was just like, I've always worked hard to wow, for Carter Physiotherapy to wow our customers the way that this guy wowed me. So if there's anything I can do to wow you, please hit reply and let me know. And so I didn't have anyone reply and say, yeah, can you come over and give me a foot rub, something stupid like that. But people were just like engaging. And all of a sudden people I hadn't heard from for years actually had replied. And then one brand new client who just started literally in the clinic, I sent it like yesterday, and the day before was her initial evaluation. She's like, hey, I literally just ordered lunch from this place because of your email. It's so awesome.
Yeah.
It's delicious, and had a great session with Cindy yesterday. Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
And she was like, emails like this, like it just reinforces like what a good choice, literally said, reinforces what a great choice I made with working with you guys.
That's awesome.
So at any rate,
that speaks to this whole idea of like let's call them micro connections, right?
Right.
And it's these ideas of short interaction points, and it can be anything from a mini telehealth to an AMA invite to whatever, right? And you're deepening the connection every time you do that.
And so what brought that up in my mind was I was thinking, well, I'm already, going to have or getting and going to be building a much more engaged email list. Right.
Right.
And so this idea of an AMA, I think, will work really well if you have an engaged email list or an engaged social following. So on the logistical side of things, they were sending it out via email. They weren't actually putting it on Reddit, were they?
No. I said it was like a
Reddit. Okay.
Like a, yeah. Yeah, it
So
was that idea. It was like an AMA concept. Yeah.
So they sent it out to their email list essentially, and maybe on social, and said, submit your questions and we'll answer them live. And were they doing like a Facebook Live, or were they doing a?
So I didn't actually join their session in terms of how they delivered it. But they did it was an online live, workshop type concept,
cool.
Right? But you're seeding the content, or some of the content, based on the questions that come in, versus just saying come at 7:00 on Thursday because we know what content to deliver, right? Now you're saying, tell us what you want to hear, and we're going to talk about that on Thursday at 7:00. And I'm sure you're obviously going to deliver some of your own, information along with that. But you're letting the customer drive, what it is they want to hear about, and creating those points of engagement. And
I love it.
Other thing I like about that kind of concept too is, I think with the push to, I'm a huge fan of encouraging everybody to jump in on social and live video and all that kind of stuff. But I'll be honest, that's not naturally me myself, right? And not everybody is. So that kind of tactic is what I'd call a bit of a bridge tactic, where, somebody who says, you know what, like, I know my content, I know how to provide the insights and the answers that people need. And I've got the depth, I have the substance, but I'm not the person who's going to be online social all the time. Right. That's the kind of tactic that allows you to socially engage with your audience, but in a fairly controlled way. Right. So I think there's certain personalities of clinic owners and PTs out there that go, hey, you know what, that's something I could deliver. And you're also not just speaking at people, right? You're driving the engagement as well. And so I think there's, some interesting concepts there.
That is a great idea. I'm excited to do that one.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's fantastic as far as, obviously I've been talking all about the online workshops. We've been doing that in our clinic and teaching others about it. But this idea of, creating a scenario where, you're saying it's at a certain time, but they can still ahead of time get in questions, and they're going to be engaged when they get that recording. And it puts a spin on it. I think is brilliant. That is really cool. I'm excited to utilize that in what we do. Because it's been really cool working with Paul now. My email list before, when it was just all newsletters, I feel like I kind of taxed it as far as trying to fill my online workshops. And like 2 workshops ago, I was like, okay, this is probably the last time. And I'll email once or mention it in the PS or whatever when I've got an upcoming workshop. But since I'm repeating the same workshop now at this point a lot, it was clear that I had to go. And social is the same thing. Organic social was not producing enough. So it's like, okay, I've got to move into the direction of paid, Facebook ads, which I'm now working with Paul at Patient Sites. And for listeners, Paul is also a past podcast guest with a great episode on email deliverability and SEO. And after this, Scott and I are going to do a video recording of some really cool insights and SEO and stuff like that. So y'all keep an eye out for that, or ear out for that. So we've kind of talked about some of the cool strategies that you've seen practice owners use to kind of make it to this point. And I think that if we can all agree that there will be enormous economic repercussions due to the shutting down of so many businesses and the closing of so many businesses, and
absolutely
the scared, the fear, the people, it all kind of adds into this slow grind down of the economic wheels, right? And so I don't know if anyone could argue that we don't have even worse economic stuff ahead than what we've already, been dealing with. So with I think that is like probably a pretty acceptable likelihood. We don't know timeframes, but likely that's on the horizon. When a practice owner says, Scott, Patient Sites, what can we do to prepare for that and to be able to deal with that? What are you guys working on or suggesting at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've, to date, and you're always, like you, concerned about what the future is economically for all businesses, right? I don't, there's very few that have been safe in what's been going on.
Right. Except Zoom.
Except, Peloton. And,
Peloton and Zoom.
They've done all right. I kicked myself because when this all started, my wife called me one day at work. I think it was the days when they March and schools, they said, okay, that's it for schools. And, businesses started shutting down. There was just one pivotal day, right? And she calls me, and I responded and I said, we better go buy Zoom and Peloton stock. And only if I had. Right?
Exactly.
But that was my retort to kind of what was going on, right? and only if I had. But we, so far, majority of the clinics we work with have been fighting well and holding their own, right? And that's why I said, hats off to the hustlers and everything people are doing. We've seen a few clinics that have really struggled and been on the brink. A couple have closed their doors. That's tough to see. We're doing everything we can to help clinics that let us know that they're having issues, to provide as much support as we can. But in terms of more broadly, there's 2 or 3 different areas I've thought about on this one. And first is to over focus, I think, on and in the process develop discipline that can that'll transcend this period that we're going through, right? And focus on how do you improve everything around marketing to your patient list, the database that you have, whether it's in treatment current or recent patients. And that's an area where there's often not a lot of focus. I think sometimes we hear too much focus on lead generation and ads, and that again, marketing is a mix, right? So there's I'm pretty close to finishing up an ebook on what we're calling evergreen marketing. And it's this whole concept of there has to be a balanced mix. And I don't think it's much different than, a good investment advisor would talk to you about from a investment portfolio standpoint, right? You should be holding some pretty conservative at all times, right? Allocations to an investment portfolio. And that conservative allocation is not going to look very good in the years where the market goes up 10%. Right. But in, the kind of world we're living in, or maybe living in, the market's been holding its own beyond what I thought right now. But, if things pull back, it's you've got that conservative allocation that kind of grounds you. Right. And so not unlike that with your marketing mix, you have to look at different elements. I think one of the areas that we think is often underserved with clinics in the marketing mix is your existing patients. Right. So, things like, staying connected through a whole variety of ways. So, that AMA example is an interesting one, but even, just things like, at base level, if you're not doing anything else, getting some newsletter content out to people. If you've got time on your hands, or staff that have time on their hands, some one-to-one reach outs. Hey, how are you doing? We know that, everybody's life's upside down. How are you? Right. And letting them know that you care as a person, right? Like that is a massive opportunity for connection. Obviously, we talked about telehealth, but if you have to look at what do you do with your time if business is down and you have time, or some of your staff have time, and hopefully you're not having to lay people off. Maybe this idea of doing small virtual connection points with your existing patients just for 5 or 10 minutes, right? Is an area of opportunity. So I would say go deep with your existing patient list. They obviously become your best referral source over time. So the more people know that you're there for them and you care in this kind of time, that's obviously going to pay dividends in the future. So that'd be the kind of the first area we try to drive, get people to focus on. Second, we've talked a lot about this just by virtue of our, the way we've navigated our chat today. But, second, I've been thinking more and more about is, all aspects of telehealth, right? And so the obvious being the, trying to do in-person sessions as much as you can. It'll, help soften the blow of revenue loss. But we talked about some of those other examples where I think that technology from a micro connection standpoint could become very important. Again, just connecting even with existing patients, if it's not a full-on, virtual treatment session, right? Or connecting with prospects, or connecting with patients of the past. So I think that becomes a big area of opportunity for clinics to shore up your relationships, because at the end of the day, you talk about, your short rib story, right? That kind of customer really becomes loyal through a series of, connection points that you built on. That's not just about transfer of money, right? So some of these kind of virtual connection points that I think telehealth allows you to build can happen without transfer of money, or without transfer of full session money, right? There's things that you can still do to make money on that. So those are, I think, two of the key areas. A third area we're and this goes back, it will kind of lead into the kind of SEO concept somewhat. It's not just SEO, but we've been thinking a lot, and this has forced us to be honest. We've, you look at everybody gets forced to think a little bit differently when you're at a time like this. And, while we've, from a service delivery standpoint, tried to be ahead of the curve by providing our clients or clinics with the information they've needed through COVID before they knew they needed it, that's helped us. We all have to find ways to be relevant, right? So that's one of the tacks that we've taken. But from a larger standpoint, a kind of a more, holistic marketing standpoint, one of the things I think is missing in a lot of clinics' marketing mix is marketing assets, which I define as things that work for you, that generate interest, prospects, business engagement, but that you own. And you don't have to keep paying a consultancy or an agency or Google or Facebook every single month to keep it alive. And I have a feeling that there's been a massive pendulum shift in the last few years to, you got to drop thousands of dollars into, online ads, right? And you've got to run, whatever type of program to, monetize that. And well, you get into a situation like we're in now where, advertising is not quite working as well from a lead generation standpoint because of the world we're living in. That's where you see the other parts of your asset allocation. Do you have other things that are working for you? And I think a lot of clinics don't, right?
Right.
And so this is an area that we're doing a fair amount of work in. And there's a number of components, but the anchor is rethinking SEO, right? And SEO for me has always been about, we throw the word long tail around, which is, trying to see that you're ranking on descriptive terms. But truth of it is, most of the clinics that we talk to, we have the same conversation that we had 7 or 8 years ago, right? Which is, am I or am I not ranking for physical therapy in insert my city, right?
Yeah.
And that's important, obviously. So even within SEO, there's a marketing mix, right? But a lot of people just see that one thing and go, that's SEO, right? And there's so much more behind that. And we've been doing we actually have been in beta with a lot of these new concepts and are seeing some huge results, right? And so the cornerstone of it is what I'm calling opportunity mining. And it's a pretty significant shift in terms of how most people look at SEO. Now, frankly, it also is a little more costly, but you're building assets, right? So most people approach SEO by saying...
And when you say building assets, you mean you're building assets you're not having to continue to pay for them to exist and work for you.
Yeah, and I'll give you some examples here for sure. But most people go, even if so, step one is, hey, am I ranking for physical therapy in my city, right? Everybody asks that. And well, the next one that'll often come is, well, but what about massage therapy in my city? Or, physical therapy. And maybe you go even a level deeper. The deepest I've seen any clinic go is, I want to be ranking for back pain therapy in my city, right? And they'll develop some content strategy around that. And, but that's rare, right? So generally it's, it's,
really?
Most people are super high on it's the city level. It's physical therapy. That's what I'm focused on, or it's an ancillary service. But the number of clinics that focus on getting into actual points of pain, it's a small percentage, right?
It's good to hear as a clinic owner that competitors aren't onto that yet.
Well, I wouldn't say, there's no competitors that are, but I would say if you, broad strokes, if you look across the market, majority are not, right? But opportunity mining takes this and explodes the whole concept, right? And says, okay, if I took, it'll blow your mind. If I took give me a topic, physical therapy for
knee pain or for ACL injury or
right. Yeah. You give me any topic. And from the process that we've been building around opportunity mining, I can absolutely blow your mind on what opportunities we'll find that you never would have thought of, right? And opportunity mining says, let's take a theme. So let's call our objective themes, right? And the other shift too is saying, pick one theme, right? So we don't want 10. We want knee pain, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're only going to focus on that until we feel like we built out a beachhead on that. But on that theme, like I'll give you an example. We've now this is a pretty large clinic group, so they can benefit from some searches nationally or across multiple states. But we have an example with them where we've taken one theme, right, and that theme is currently ranking on 1,400 keywords.
Wow. Ranking. When you say ranking, are you saying top 5, top 10? What do you?
Yes.
How do you define? Wow.
Correct. Right.
In the world.
And now it is being, but they're super descriptive, right? Now the intent wasn't to rank on 1,400. We just knew there would be an ancillary uplift. But what happens with the opportunity mining process is you say, let's pick a theme that you want to, develop, strong ranking for. And we're not going to start to, so generally what people will then do is say, okay, let's build a list of articles. Okay. Here's 10 articles. Who's going to write them? What's our, we don't do that, right? We say, let's take the theme and let's go and do an opportunity mining process and find out how are people accessing content related to that theme. Let them tell us, right? And a lot of times it's even questions, right? It's these long form questions that people are asking, right? That are a backdoor to the way that goes. And within the opportunity mining process, we can actually determine the sweet spot of keywords or things that people are searching for that have got reasonable activity, but not super high on the competitive score. Because the other thing is, too often you go after the big keywords, right? And you develop content and you find that you're still, lagging on page 2, page 3, because so many people are on those, right?
Right.
But the reason I gave you the example of 1,400 keywords, there's some of those that are going to deliver very little traffic, right? But if they're delivering very little traffic across, now it's national. So when you bring this down to a local level, so let's go from tens to hundreds versus hundreds to thousands, right? But if you have within your theme, you've got tens to hundreds of different keywords within your theme that are driving traffic to you year after year after year after year. That now becomes a marketing asset that market up, market down, business good, business bad, is not shut off because you have to say, hey, we can't spend $5,000 on ads this month, right?
Right.
So, this one particular one that we've been working on, I took a look at some stats, and it's being tested right now with a pretty subtle call to action. So there's not a massive, in your face pop-up. But the other very interesting thing about theming is, there's a separate discipline, which, you and I have talked about on marketing, which is everything to do with, funnel marketing, right? And engaging a lead and sending information of interest. Well, you go back to this idea of theming. If you could try to pick, 7 or 8 topics, knee pain, back pain, runners, skiers, you want to focus on, the odds are you don't have the time or the resources to build really good funnels for all of those, right? But if you pick a theme and try to dominate a theme, we can leverage that funnel across all of the content that we produce in that theme, right? So it also is a lot more efficient from that standpoint. But on this particular one, we've got, a really subtle call to action, and it's at the bottom of the article. We're going to be replacing.
And we're talking about like a blog post essentially on
multiple posts. So the theme ends up having multiple posts, and every post has a prescription. So before we write the post, we'll go to the writer and say, here are the 8 headings for this post based on the opportunity mining research, right?
When you say heading, just to describe for the listener, so you're talking H2 subheaders that you want to target those keywords.
Yeah, so a title for the copy, the below. So it's heading, paragraph.
Right.
And then we've got other copy that will guide for the paragraphs, right? But the whole objective is to see that one particular piece rank on, a number of keywords. But we've learned in doing it well, there's an amplification beyond what we could have initially computed or planned on, right?
Really?
Based on the fact that we're writing at such a more detailed, longer tail format through everything, that there's so many other combinations that people are searching for that are getting, an additional lift, right? But go ahead, Gig.
Yeah, I think I'll forget because I already have so many of these SEO questions now that and again, we'll do a video recording of what he, so people can see what he's talking about with opportunity mining and finding, essentially I'm guessing it is, maybe it's not Google keyword search, but it's just finding the things that have, that people are searching for, but they don't have as much competition, and then extracting and how do we rank for those things, short and long tail. And one of the questions that pops up in my head, and since I'm with an SEO expert, I'd like to ask is, do you see evidence that if you're writing multiple articles on the same or a similar topic, let's say we it sounds like you guys are actually targeting multiple keywords and short and long tail in each article,
Yes.
which I know in the past, I've heard a lot of people saying, you really want to have that kind of primary key phrase that you're targeting, and that's what you focus on. But you guys are having huge success, focusing on multiple related, but still different key phrases. So do you see evidence that if you're doing multiple articles within a theme, so you're having a lot of repetitive keywords and key phrases that are in different articles, do they compete against one another?
No, because the prescription, each article has go to the H2 idea, right? In the paragraph, starts with a prescription of what the H2s in the paragraphs are, right? So again, this is bottom up strategy. Top down is, we want an article on back pain, find a writer, right? Mm-hmm. And if you find a writer and you ask them to write 8 different articles on back pain, you're going to get all kinds of, overlapping. I won't say we don't have any overlapping, but you'll find a lot more overlapping concepts than if you go to the writer and say, we need an article on, and it won't be back pain total, right? It'll be broken down on a more detailed level. And you'll say, you need to write 8 paragraphs, and here's your 8 paragraph topics. And here are some key things we want to build into the actual paragraph content. So they sit down, and everything is gets scripted from the opportunity mining research. So it's bottom up, and so it's more versus I think what you're getting at is this idea of, is there lateral competition between them?
Yes. Yeah.
This is more of a roll-up strategy, right? So what actually ends up happening is they all end up supporting the broader, more competitive term, right? Mm-hmm. Which is in and of itself harder to rank on if you just go out to do that. So if you get into now physical therapy for back pain, they all roll up to support that one broader concept, right? Mm-hmm. But every article in and of themselves has a prescribed, content directive for the writer.
Okay. And so for those who are listening and saying, they're already into blogging, they're already into SEO, and they're like, how do I apply this? So with this concept or the strategy, how many different key phrases are you targeting with the H2s? Again, folks, that's the little, you go to a blog post and you see the title, that's an H1. And then, you get a little bit of normal text, and then the paragraphs below that, they're often separated by these subtitles that are, bold, and those are the H2s, just to give some context.
Yep.
So Scott, how many different key phrases are you targeting? Let's just say in a single article, how many key phrases would you target in those subheader, the H2s? Is it multiple, or are you picking 1 or 2, or is it the same as the title?
No, there's some range to it, but we're looking in and around 10.
Wow.
And the second thing is we're also focusing long form. So the content that we're writing to support this is no less than 1,500 words, closer to 2,000, right?
Okay.
So again, back to I realize we're going a little deep down the SEO side here.
Sure.
But I want to back it up and say, the third thing I was really trying to talk to here is this idea of, investing in developing assets that work for your clinic. So the idea is, and I took a look at, just a couple of the articles I looked at yesterday. They've been generating leads all week, right? Mm-hmm. Those articles will be generating leads all week, a year from now, 2 years from now, right? Years and years and years. So economy up, economy down. You're taking a look at what I'm doing, what I call some of the real work, right? In terms of marketing, like there's no, there's no shortcut. There's no consultancy you can hire that'll go, hey, turn on that magic thing, this or the secrets of, whatever, right? Reality is, and I think, one of the things that we hope, clinics will really be able to work on through a lot of this is realizing that there's no secret, right? There's no magic thing to unlock. Like everything else, there's so much opportunity if you do the work, and that work should have a bit of a menu in terms of your mix, right? So, but you look at it and go, at the end of the day, you want to have a portion of your, marketing being, let's say, ad driven, when the economy is appropriate. You want to have a portion of it be asset driven, right? Where you're building these kind of, lead generators that we call them worker bees, right? They're just, you're doing whatever you're doing, they're continuing to work for you, and they don't cost you any more money than they did on day one. However, you're not getting your money back on day one, right? Like it'll take some time, but you've built an asset that's not going away, right? It'll be there 5 years later. So, it's a bit of a mind shift in terms of how a lot of clinics operate. And, it's going to be a major theme from patient sites through the rest of this year, which is invest in yourself, right? When you invest in everyone else's business and you invest in Facebook, you invest in, consulting companies that, are you're relying on to bring on all your leads. If you put all your eggs in, any one basket, and things change like they have now, you've exposed yourself, right, to, things, to elements that may be harder, in down markets. So, if the economy does slide, I think, this whole idea of, being captain of your own ship is important, right? There's nothing from, a service, then there's nothing, again, there's no secret. So that's why I said, if we do a demo or take you through this whole idea of opportunity mining, I'm never going to write an ebook that says, hey, we've got, the magic secrets that no one else knows. At the end of the day, there's no secrets, there's work, right? This kind of process takes a little more time, takes a little more work, but like everything else, if, the good results are often on the other side of putting in real work, right?
Very good, man. I think that's a perfect place to end this part. I'm excited to get on and do that video recording of exactly how you find these opportunities. And I have to say, I'm surprised, just because for years and years, so many have been talking about that, the opportunities that lie in finding a theme and focusing on, physical therapy in your area for, ankle sprains, for knee pain, for ACL rehab. I'm surprised to hear that not as many people have already begun doing that. And so as a listener out there, it sounds, consider what Scott's talking about.
Well, and just the one thing I'll say on that too, if you're in a smaller market, while there's opportunity mining will still work for you, but if you're in a really small market, it's a pretty elastic response between you going and creating a couple of articles on physical therapy for back pain, for knee pain, for runners, for whatever. You may only need to throw up 1 or 2 articles, and you will end up ranking well, just because the competitiveness is not there, right? But that's not going to work for you in Manhattan, right?
Right.
But even in the smaller market, what you won't be capturing through opportunity mining is these other more creative ways people are trying to access that content, right? The questions that they're asking. So opportunity mining is more about, how are people looking for this? And that's where, the kind of the hidden things are that are there. We just haven't, rustled enough bushes to find them, right? So it's kind of a fun process on our side, because we're blown away, because at the end of the day, we're not making this up, right? We're like, man, now I wouldn't have thought of those 15 things, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. Awesome. I'm excited to learn more details in that. Well, as always, thank you so much, man. This has been enlightening for me, and certainly for the listeners as well, or viewers. We're now doing a lot more of these recorded on video. So keep that in mind, folks. If you like YouTube, hop over and find the Dr. Jarod Carter YouTube channel. That's talk about assets there. I mean, our YouTube videos have produced literally hundreds of thousands in leads and patients for our business over the last 10 years. So we can talk about that in the next one. But thank you again, as always. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear that you guys have been able to really help so many practices that work with you to make it through these crazy times and certainly the times ahead.
Thanks, Jarod. It's always a pleasure. And to your listeners, we're, keep on keeping on. It's, these are the days we got to muddle through, and it's great to see so many clinics are hustling, as we say. So keep it up.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cash-Based Practice Podcast. If you liked what you heard here today, we have some extremely important things we want to send you. First, a quick start guide to cash-based physical therapy and Medicare. This free ebook will provide the primary rules and regulations surrounding this confusing but important topic. Secondly, we want to share with you the 5 characteristics common to all successful cash-based practices. Find out the vital things Jarod has learned from years of interviewing cash practice owners and running his own successful cash practice. As one of our listeners, we want to give you all this information absolutely free. You can get it right now by going to drjarodcarter.com/success. Again, that's drjarodcarter.com/success. Go there now to get your copies, and we'll see you next time.